All right, y'all. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J is live, and I tell you, I have not been this excited about a show in a very, very, very long time. We got a live show. We've got special guests. I've got a 3-time Emmy Award winner on the show tonight. I've got a serial entrepreneur on the show tonight. They're going to tell you their story. I've got Dave in LA on the show tonight. I've got the whole crew checking in with us tonight. Very excited. You're going to have commentary from yours truly on some news that's going on right now in the world. You in for a great show, and I'm glad you tuned in to us. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J right now.
Open your ears, strap on your thinking cap. Socially conscious talk that's entertaining with a dash of humor and the top sports stories of the week. It's time for Ain't No Half Steppin' with Marcus J.
Sellers has Jordan. Jordan with 2 seconds to go. Puts it up and scores at the buzzer. Michael Jordan has won it for Chicago. Manning lobs it. Burris alone. Touchdown, New York.
Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. He hits one deep to right center. That ball is out of here. The Yankees win the pennant.
If they lying, then they must be half stepping. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. Is live. We here. We in the building, and we are going to have just a dynamite show with us tonight. The phone lines are off, so there will be no phone calls tonight. But that's cool because I just need you guys to sit back and listen. We got a great show for y'all tonight. We appreciate everybody that's checking in. Thank you to those folks that are listening to us live on TuneIn. We appreciate you. Thank you to those folks who have checked into our website at www.legacyinternetradio.com. We appreciate you as well. And we thank everyone who's listening to our replays right now on YouTube. It's because of you guys, week after week after week, tuning in to Ain't No Half Steppin' with Marcus J. Every week on Legacy Internet Radio is the reason why we continue to grow. Fastest growing internet radio station here in the Richmond, Virginia, RVA, Central Virginia area and beyond. So thank you to those folks that are listening to us in Jersey City, New Jersey right now. Thank you to those folks that are listening to us in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania right now, Chicago, Atlanta, Georgia. We see the lights on in those areas already, and hopefully if you're listening, you're telling someone, I am listening to Ain't No Half Steppin' with Marcus J. We appreciate it. We're sponsored by Live Action Captions as well as Free Spirit Enterprises, and we'll have a word from those sponsors here at some point before we close out the show tonight. What you're in for, we've got special interviews, 2 of them. One will be featuring a 3-time Emmy Award winner, our sister Patricia Gonzalez. She is the author of The Grand Adventures of Patty and Fenway. We're also going to hear from the serial entrepreneur, president and CEO of Outreach Realty Services and the Outreach School of Real Estate, our sister Roberta Hosky. She's going to join us later on in the show as well. And then we'll have a word from our brother Dave in LA, David Wren. You've heard from him on our show many times in the past. He is the host of Tando Radio Show on the Black Talk Radio Network. And so he is a friend and family to our show, and we thank him for joining us when he's able. Of course, you'll hear from the crew throughout the night as well here on the show. But what I wanted to do, and you just have yours truly here now, just me, in this first segment, but hopefully you guys will indulge me and allow me to kind of offer my commentary on some of the stories that is pretty much capturing the imagination of the United States public right now. There's a few things, and so I'm just going to kind of offer my quick hits, and then we'll move on to the rest of the show. First thing, Waco, Texas. Waco, Texas. Now, For those folks who have been living under a rock for the last 24 hours, there was an incident that happened at a restaurant called Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is, I guess for lack of a better term, it is very similar to Hooters. If you know what Hooters are, you know what Hooters does and why folks like to go to Hooters other than the wings, if you know what I mean. That's why people go to Twin Peaks. It's a restaurant, it's a chain. And this particular chain down in Waco, Texas, was the scene of a pretty, matter of fact, just to make it plain, it was gang violence. It was gang war. It was gang violence. It was bikers, biker gang. And depending on who you listen to, there's just kind of a couple of different ways that the story is coming out. You've got the owner of the Twin Peaks who is saying that the police and the owner has been working together because they knew that there was going to be some gang violence going on there. And then you have the police saying that they had no idea about this and they were responding to an isolated incident. Well, Twin Peaks corporate office Monday revoked the license for that franchise, so there won't be a Twin Peaks there in Waco any longer. The gang violence, the rival biker gangs, left 9 dead, 18 injured, and about 170 people in custody. And I tell you, you know, it's crazy. We saw the video and the file footage on television and, you know, the police rounding them up. And from what I've been able to gather, the police went in there and they are the ones that took out most of those gang members, you know, as far as, you know, they were shooting and killing each other, but the police went in and kind of finished it off. And so that was very, very interesting to me. The one thing that I have not heard come up in the discussion about what went on in Waco was the word thug. You know, when you have very clear gang violence, you know, typically that's a word that comes up. And I've been on record many times in the past as saying that I feel as though the word thug is code. It's the new N-word, so to speak. And I've been taken to task for using that thought process, and people are disagreeing with me. And I found it very ironic that, you know, you've got very clear gang violence, very clear, no question that you've got gang violence, and no one has used that word thug. And I just think that it's a fair question to ask, why haven't you heard that word? If you were looking at Bloods and Crips, I'm pretty sure you would have heard the word thug come up at least once. We're getting a couple of hits on social media. Richard says, "Thug life, respect my thug rap music." As soon as the media starts, after many years of this kind of lifestyle, you know, he's basically kind of co-signing. He's got some things I can't really read on the air, but he's basically agreeing with the word thug here. Dan, he's saying no one will say it, but those idiots are thugs, juvenile criminal idiots who never evolved beyond schoolyard justice, but rather just got bigger and brought more dangerous weapons to the schoolyard. Biker gangs. Shaking my head. So I just find that curious. Find it very, very curious that the word thug never came up. And I'm just looking at the way it's being reported. You know, if you have a white person go into a movie theater and shoot it up, you know, no one's calling him a terrorist, but I think it's very clear that he is a terrorist if he's going into a movie theater terrorizing people, if he goes into a school and terrorizing people. But there is not the look of the media's vision of terrorists. You're not a brown-skinned person with, you know, a long beard and shaggy hair and looking of Middle Eastern descent. So you don't fit the stereotypical vision of what a terrorist is, so they don't use that word. Similarly, in my opinion, is the reason why they have not used the word thug to describe these thugs who, in the midst of a gang war, killed 9 of their own. And you can argue that the police took some of them out, but it's their behavior and the fact that the police had to be called to the scene. They created this situation. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. Continuing on, another story that has been in the news for about the last week is the tragic train derailment in Pennsylvania that shut down train train service between that area of Pennsylvania all the way up to New York, New Jersey area. And this particular angle has been interesting. I mean, we heard, I think we even talked about it on other shows, not this show, but other shows on Legacy Internet Radio last week. And so we got a little bit of that out last week. But just real quick, my commentary about Brandon Boston. And I'm getting this one. I wish my co-host S.Y. Butler was here, but she would say the Huffington Post. This is a different angle. Conservative host Sandy Rios. She thinks that Brandon Boston has crashed this car, the train cars, in part because of his sexuality. She thinks his sexuality has something to do with it. According to her, of course, we know the train derailment killed 8 people and injured 200 more. And they're saying, or she's saying, she's not inferring, quote, "I am not inferring, those of you who are gay rights activists or who like to monitor the show, I'm not inferring that this accident happened because he was gay. But I do think it's an interesting part of the story, and I bet it will be edited out. I don't know, but I think it's something to be discussed, and I think it's a factor, and I doubt you will hear it anywhere else." Someone I know who worked for a very large airline started taking hormone shots and put his entire plane at risk because he had an emotional, angry outburst to something that happened, end quote. Yeah, I guess straight people who are real pissed off can't go off their rocker and do something crazy either, huh? You got to be gay to have some sort of outburst. This is the most outrageous thing I've ever heard in my life. Outrageous. It's outrageous how you can interject someone's sexuality in such a tragic event such as this. What the hell is it? Who he goes home and has sex with, or who he goes home and loves, his partner or whatever. How does that have anything to do with this tragic accident? I mean, she goes into how she knows someone who took hormones and had an outburst. Okay, well, we know that a person who may suffer from some other type of emotional affliction or some sort of mental problem, maybe bipolar or something like that, might be taking some sort of medication that might make them, do some things that are, outside of what they would normally do. How does that have anything to do with it? I'm not suggesting having bipolar is the same as being homosexual. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm using that analogy to point out how outrageous and ridiculous her statement is. I don't think the fact that this man is a gay man has anything to do with it. I would like to hear his story. I would like to know why he's going 100 miles an hour around a 50-mile-an-hour curve. I would like to know that, but I don't think the fact that he likes men has anything to do with that. I think the fact that he's, conspicuously blacked out and doesn't remember anything, I think that's worth discussing. But I don't think it's worth discussing the fact that he likes men has anything to do with it. And I keep harping on that point because it's really that simple to me. It's really that simple. I mean, do you... all right. I don't want to talk about her no more because she sounds stupid. And I think the fact that I've spent that long talking about it kind of plays into it. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. Continuing on the nonsense to our former president, George W. Bush. Oh, George. When he left office as, in my opinion, one of the least successful presidents, certainly in my lifetime and historically, possibly ever, with 2 failed wars, he came in with a surplus, left with a deficit, promised to get Osama bin Laden, never did it. And he is giving a commencement speech. And I'm getting this one from the examiner.com. He gives a commencement speech and he is talking to the graduates. And of course, he's never been accused of being the sharpest knife in the drawer. We know he was a C student at Yale. He made his way through the political stratosphere by using his name. Of course, his father was a CIA agent. His grandfather was a banker whose banks financed the Nazis during the Second World War. That's fact. Look it up. But he, of course, used his name, of course, becoming the governor of Texas and then later on the president of the United States. Well, during a commencement speech at Southern Methodist University over the weekend, he jokingly and ironically told students who didn't graduate with the best grades that they still had a shot of being the president of the United States, saying, in part, end quote, "Those of you graduating this afternoon with high honors, awards, and distinctions, I say well done. And as I like to tell the C students, you could be president." Of course, he said that to a raucous crowd who gave him a huge round of applause. And I'll be honest with you, I found those statements to be pretty condescending, one, and two, I found them to be empty and inappropriate. How you can tell a room full of graduates who have their whole lives ahead of them, and you interject the fact that you were a mediocre student and you got over by basically being a charming guy, because I don't think anybody would, even folks that don't like him wouldn't admit that he's a charming guy. He's affable, he's funny sometimes, certainly funny looking. But I just think to make that kind of joke on a commencement it's in poor taste, and I don't think that you need to be celebrating the fact that you made it to the presidency as a mediocre student. Some would say that he compensated for his lack of scholastic acumen in other ways, and that's how he ascended to that level. That's, there's something to be said about that. But to be giving a commencement speech and to make a point of celebrating basically your failures and saying, I made it through anyway. I mean, a brother of mine, by the name of Jalil, shout out to him in the ATL, he basically said, as we were discussing this over the weekend, that George Bush and others like him, start the race or start the game on third base, to use a baseball analogy. They start the game on third base and they convince themselves and others that they actually hit a triple when they actually were put on third base. And I think that's a very good analogy, because you didn't do the work. You got there in large part because of who you are. And that, to me, I think is the problem. And I think to use that kind of rhetoric in a commencement speech highlights the delusion that you and many folks like you share, and you go in there and you say such things, especially when a lot of the people who support you had a problem with the First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, who gave a commencement speech just over a week ago at Tuskegee University, and folks had a problem with her rhetoric. Folks had a problem with the fact that she shared her personal experiences as a black woman in America, as a young black woman, and of course now as the First Lady of the United States, and some of the challenges she had. I think that it's okay to interject your personal experiences, but they need to be positive. And I don't see anything positive about being a C student, even if you put the spin on it that you too can be the president. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. Jay-Z and Beyonce are catching some heat these days lately because of the news that broke, I believe it broke today, actually, that they were helping to finance some of the bail money for the protesters who were in Baltimore, Maryland, and Ferguson, Missouri. Of course, we know there have been a lot of people who were arrested in their support of the Black Lives Matters movement, and then a lot of the protesters, some of whom are doing some violent things and some crazy things. And I don't have the specifics on who was getting the bail money, but I have been very, very vocal about the fact that people like Jay-Z and Beyonce have a duty, a responsibility, you could say, to give back to the communities that produce them, to give back to the communities who, because of their money and because of their support and because of how they celebrate them as artists, celebrate them as media moguls and things of that sort, they need to give back. And I think that when you look at the social climate in our country and you look at the fact that, Black Lives Matter is kind of the mantra that has been created in the ashes of these police-involved deaths of unarmed black males and females to a lesser degree, I found it to be a breath of fresh air to see that they had done this. And, it makes me want to kind of change my position with them and with others, because by most accounts, they didn't want this to come out. It leaked out by someone that was close to them. They were just fine being benevolent behind the scenes and wiring tens and thousands of dollars, to not only bail these folks out, but to aid into their legal fees and their, attorneys' fees and things of that sort. I think that's great. I think it's fabulous. A lot of people will have problems with the protesters, and, we call them, some call them rioters. That goes right back to the whole thug is the new N-word type of mentality. Nobody calls, white kids who burn couches in West Virginia or turn up in Kentucky after the team wins the title. We don't call them rioters. We just call them rowdy teenagers or rowdy college students. We don't call them rioters. Again, more code words. But I think that, if you're paying attention, with fair eyes, then you realize that everybody who was in the street was not a quote unquote rioter, was not out there doing negative things and looting and stealing. Of course, you had those people out there doing that. Nobody's going to dispute that. And those people should be prosecuted. They shouldn't get $350,000, $500,000 bails when the police who killed the guy got $350,000. We talked about that in a previous show. But yeah, they should absolutely be punished. Now, Jay-Z and Beyonce, while some are celebrating them, some like myself, you've got others, and they're getting a lot of hate on Twitter and in social media. Jay-Z and Beyonce are the trash we thought they are, bailing out anti-white thugs. Hashtag Baltimore riot. This is what at Daniel Genseric wrote, and his Twitter page bio claims that he is, quote, fighting white genocide. That's adorable how he's springing the thugs. Jay-Z quietly posting bail for protesters, wrote Kimba 212 Jupiter. So they're getting some hate, and that's just a couple of the many tweets that are coming out there. And notice how both of those two that I just read both had the term thug in it. To refer directly to the protesters, and I'm not calling them rioters, I'm calling them protesters. Both of them use the word thug in it, but I've yet to hear the word thug attached to the thugs down there in Waco, Texas, the gang violence that you see down there in Waco, Texas, where all of those people lost their lives. One more tweet that I see. How pathetic. I wonder if police will have second thoughts about protecting them, knowing they promoted violence against cops. Not sure that I see it as promoting violence against cops when you've got cops who killed an unarmed man, threw him in the back of a paddy wagon, and the death of Freddie Gray is what sparked the Baltimore protests. So I think at Deborah Ann GW has got it a little bit backwards, and she's described as a Christian conservative. So you can think what you want about that. Ain't no half Steppin Marcus J. The last thing I want to get to before I turn it over, before I turn the show over to our guest, is the story out of Duke University professor who says, quote, blacks riot because they're lazier than Asians and have strange un-American names. Wow. Okay. I'm getting this one from the rawstory.com, and he has since been removed from his position, and you can look up the story and you can see what's going on here. But Duke University professor Jerry Huff responded to a New York Times editorial titled How Racism Doomed Baltimore by suggesting that the author's attitude was what was wrong with the black community. Saying, quote, blacks get symbolic recognition in an utterly incompetent mayor who handled this so badly from the beginning to end that her resignation would be demanded if she were white. Don't necessarily 100% agree with that, but I do think that the mayor there butchered this, and she did a terrible job. I do agree with that. But then he continues, blacks get awful editorials like this that tell them to feel sorry for themselves. He continues and says that Asians face discrimination throughout U.S. history, saying, quote, they didn't feel sorry for themselves, but worked doubly hard. I am a professor at Duke University. Every Asian student has very simple old American first name that symbolizes their desire for integration. Virtually every black has a strange new name that symbolizes their lack of desire for integration. He continued by adding that blacks made the problem worse by refusing to date white people. Wow. Never ever heard a white person get mad for black folks for not dating white people. But hey, that's what Mr. Huff says. Saying also, quote, it was appropriate that a Chinese design won the competition for Martin Luther King. King helped them overcome. The blacks followed Malcolm X. Oh, man, this guy, he says some interesting things. In a statement, Duke Vice President for Public Affairs and Government Affairs, Michael Schoenfeld, said that Huff's comments were noxious, offensive, and have no place in civil discourse. I think I said enough on this one. First of all, let me attack a couple of things. I don't think that there's anything wrong with a person who wants to have his or her own identity and not assimilate into the dominant culture. I think that it's outrageous to assume that everyone has to have, quote, American sounding names. It does not lend to the fact that a person as an individual has the right to call him or herself whatever they choose to call him or herself. You are an individual. You are a human being, male or female, before you are a black person, before you are a white person, before you are anything else. So that's the first thing. And if you choose to call yourself a name that is not necessarily pleasing or not necessarily familiar to other people, then guess what? That's a them problem. That's not a you problem. That's a them problem. And we've seen studies many times before about how recruiters and people who are hiring managers throw the resumes of people in the trash just because their names don't sound right or they don't sound familiar to them, which is outrageous. And I think that is a very strong level of discrimination that I don't know how we combat that, but I think the education and also think that tolerance and awareness are certainly the first steps. As far as Asians, facing discrimination in this country, I mean, you know what? I'm not going to argue with someone who has suffered more than others. I think our history in this country has been well documented. We know what we've been through in this country with regards to slavery, with regards to Jim Crow, with regards to the civil rights movement. Ann Coulter actually came out last week and said that, haven't we done enough, for people in this country, or haven't we done enough to make up for slavery? And I just think that that's outrageous. I mean, no one ever says, haven't we done enough to make up for the Holocaust? Haven't we done enough, to make up for any other atrocity that has been done to people in this country? And I think that people who hold those kinds of thought processes oftentimes are the ones who are in front of the cameras. They're in front of the students. They hold the badges. A lot of these people traded in their white sheets for blue uniforms and black robes. And I think we need to be mindful of that. There was a study that came out that said that the KKK and others, had a trend of infiltrating law enforcement. And so we act like we don't know that because that, study was swept under the rug. But then when you see these large instances of people of color being accosted and in some cases murdered in cold blood by law enforcement and others, then we act like, well, if it wasn't for black on black crime, they wouldn't be in a position to do that. Well, Freddie Gray was sitting on a porch. He had a record. Of course he did. But he was sitting on a porch when he was accosted. The same with Eric Garner. He got choked out while screaming he couldn't breathe. What about the brother who ran and got shot in the back when they said it was a taser? Oh, there's two of those. There's the one that was recent, and then there was the one in, Fruitvale Station a few years ago. It's the mentality, people. And I'm going a little bit on a rant, and I'll go ahead and end this now, but it's the mentality. It's the mentality of the people that you see at work every single day who will smile in your face but go home and call you the N-word, which is the reason why you should never do that, because that word was created to hurt you, not to endear yourself to like kind people. So be aware of that. Ain't No Half Steppin' with Marcus J. I want to thank everybody that's listening to the show tonight. Just to kind of go through our lineup before I take the first break of the night. Ain't No Half Steppin' with Marcus J. You're listening to it live every single Monday night, 7 p.m. until. We are the flagship show right here on Legacy Internet Radio and live in radio, hosted by Mr. LP Steven Sykes. Every Tuesday, it's a spiritual talk, community-based. On Wednesday, you've got the Uptown Lounge, 7 p.m., featuring the Great Debate at 8 hip-hop show. And then on Thursdays, you've got All Throttle Radio. All Throttle Radio, which is a show about black bikers, biker culture. So we're very excited for them to be on Thursdays at 7, followed by The Listening Party. Hip-hop, old school beats, underground. The Listening Party airs at 9:30 on Thursday nights. And then getting you ready for the weekend, you got the pregame on Fridays at 8. And then on Saturdays, we play music for a good portion of the day. We've got the show Conversations from Your Sisters with S.Y. and Lissa P. airing around 3 o'clock. And then at 5, you've got the world famous Aaron Turner show airing at 5 o'clock. And then the Bob Marley and the Family Reggae Mix at 9 on Saturdays. That goes all night long. We play reggae from 9 all night into Sunday morning until 6 a.m. when we pick up with Amplified Gospel. Amplified Gospel picks up at 6 a.m. on Sundays and runs for 24 hours. Legacy Internet Radio, we got something for everybody, and we appreciate those folks who are listening to us for their very first time tonight. We know we've got some new listeners tonight. We appreciate them, and we also appreciate the longtime listeners, the folks that are listening to us on TuneIn. We appreciate you pulling out your phone, your tablet, your iPhone, your computer, going to TuneIn and searching Legacy Internet Radio. We appreciate you. We appreciate you for going to www.legacyinternetradio.com. We appreciate you liking and joining all of our fan pages on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook. It's because of you guys that we continue to grow, and we thank you for it. Thank you for listening to us on YouTube and our replays as well. So we're going to take our first break of the night. And first up to bat, we've got a 3-time Emmy Award winner that's going to join us here on the show. We've got Miss Patty Gonzalez, the author of The Grand Adventures of Patty and Fenway. She's going to join us up first, and then later on, you've got the serial entrepreneur, president and CEO of Outreach Realty Services and Outreach School of Real Estate. Our sister Roberta Hosky is going to follow up. Marcus J. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. We're going to take our first break. When we come back, we got our special guest. Stay with us.